Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Women's Policy Action Network discussion series. I'm your host, Nirmali Ameresekere, and joined with us today is our guest, Dinali Peiris. Dinali, it's good to have you with us today. Thank you for joining in.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, today we'll be discussing on the Women Go Beyond program at MAS and its significant contributions to empowering women, not only at the local level but also on a global scale. Before we get into the discussion, let me give you a brief introduction to Dinali. Dinali Peiris is Director of Group Human Resources at MS Holdings and serves on the MS Holdings Apparel Board and its Sustainability Advisory Committee, leading initiatives like Women Go Beyond and Women in Management. She champions diversity and inclusion across the organization's global workforce of over 100,000 in 15 countries. Leveraging her progressive career, Dinali advocates for gender equality throughout the organization. So, Dinali, thank you once again for joining in. Moving on with the discussion, apparel and textile remain a major source of export earnings for Sri Lanka, as you may know, Dinali. And what's interesting about in terms of labor force is that a majority of those employed in this sector are actually women. And just bringing in a statistic right here, according to a 2017 study done by the IPS, it says that women have consistently held over 80% of the employment share in the industry. So, Dinali, I think it's great that at MS that you have a program like Women Go Beyond to empower women in the organization. So, can you give the audience a brief overview of what this program is all about and why was it important for the organization to have a program dedicated especially for women's empowerment and gender equality?
Sure. So I think what may be useful is if I maybe share a little bit with the audience as to what exactly led to MAS launching such a program. And it's now been 20 years since we've had the program in place. Why it has been important for us to continue to focus on the program and make sure that we have a dedicated women's empowerment and gender equality program in place at MAS. And to be honest, it's quite difficult to pinpoint like one reason as to why we embarked and why we launched the MAS Women Go Beyond program. But rather there, I think, is a multitude of reasons that led up to this. And all of it was really with us having the ultimate goal in place to make sure that we address and bridge gaps in resources, skills, rights, and the needs of women in the workplace to make it more equitable, to make it more comfortable, and a safer place for everybody to thrive in. So if I was to just look back at the 30 years of MAS, right? That's when we started our journey. And when we were building our organization, like what you rightly stated, predominantly we were employing women into the company. And because we are a family-owned company, we were really fueled by family values. And we have a culture at MAS of always doing the right thing. And that is really how we looked at our talent, and even from a people perspective, who were predominantly women. And that was always our center and what was foremost in our minds. So in terms of how did we take care of our employees, the kind of meals and the nutrition that we gave them whilst they were at work, how do we bring them to work safely and transport them back home? How do we make sure that we give them the necessary skills for them to do their job effectively and to progress? All of this became part of how we did our business. It just became part of everyday work for us. And as the company grew, we continued this way of work right across MAS, not just here in Sri Lanka, but across all the different countries that we work in. We then came across this time when the industry globally was taking a beating on its reputation, where the industry was accused of not operating in an ethical working environment, for violating worker standards, for violating employee rights. And there was this reputation that the apparel industry is made up of sweatshop operations. And that really was what we were faced with. And then when we looked at ourselves internally, we realized that we were doing things very differently at MAS. And we had a unique value proposition of how we were looking after our employees, which was very different to what was kind of being reported in other countries. And we decided that it was time to showcase this and to talk about it and talk about the work that we do in this space. And because our workforce is predominantly women, a lot of the practices, the policies that we had bought in was centered around women and empowering them to overcome their challenges and for them to progress professionally and personally. And we decided there was something interesting here for us to talk about. And what we also realized was, whilst we were talking about the importance of this kind of work that would help set the industry standards high and set an example, hopefully, for the rest of the world to also follow, we also saw this as an opportunity to really acknowledge and address the challenges that women were facing and to engage actively in bridging these gaps that they would face in terms of gaps in resources, knowledge, and opportunities that they would get in the workplace. And that is really how we then came up with our homegrown women's empowerment program, which we call the Women Go Beyond, where we look at the unique needs of our women in terms of childcare, education and awareness, financial empowerment, career progression, health, etc. And we identify what their needs are and how we can actively intervene to address those needs. And that really is what the program is all about. And what we really want to do is to make sure that through this work, we create an environment which is more equitable, comfortable, and a safe place for our women to thrive in, understand the challenges that they have in society and at work, and make sure that we help address those challenges. And that it was really a build-up of all of this that kind of resulted in the Women Go Beyond program being launched. Now, what is interesting, and I think what we are all very proud of, is that it's now 20 years since the program was formed. The program itself over the last 20 years has undergone significant evolution to meet the changing needs of the woman. We've expanded the scope beyond the initial kind of interventions that we had, and we've really taken a much more comprehensive approach in terms of how we address this. The program today, whilst having a very deep scope of some of the original interventions which we had around sexual and reproductive health and rights and gender-based violence, we also look at a lot of policy and infrastructure interventions that we had to also bring into place. And the program has kind of evolved, and why this program continues to be of prime importance to MAS is we have over 100,000 employees that work for us globally, and a good 80 to 85% are women. So ensuring that their needs are addressed is important. Whilst that's an internal perspective, externally, women are a great talent pool that exists in every country, and we need to make sure that we continue to attract, retain, and develop the best talent. So we want to create an environment where we are attracting more women to also join us, so that we create this equitable place for everyone to work and thrive. So that's just a little bit of the why we kind of launched it and why it continues to be a very important program for us.
Right. Thank you for that, Dinali. So actually, Dinali, I think you already touched this in your answer, but it's actually amazing how like this program has created a paradigm shift, not just locally, but in the global apparel industry. So if you could just tell us what specific initiatives have been particularly impactful in this journey.
Sure. So the program initially started off here in Sri Lanka with a very Sri Lanka kind of focus. But today, the program is just not here in Sri Lanka. We have taken it to many of the countries that we operate in. And over the last 20 years, the program itself has, we've done over 12,000 kind of interventions from a programming perspective. And we've possibly impacted and provided opportunities through the programs for over 5 million kind of individuals that have been impacted by the work that has been done in this space. What's interesting is whilst we've been doing all of this internally, really driven by the fact that it's the right thing to do and it's the way we work, our customers that have been working with us have also recognized that this is an important aspect of work and they have partnered with us. Some of them have sponsored some of the awards that we have at our flagship events. They have partnered with us on projects that address infrastructure support for childcare and for moms returning back from maternity. We've also been recognized and showcased on international platforms for the work that we do. We are a part of a global initiative and a program called the United Nations Global Compact, the UNF and IFC, where we have been showcased and we try to influence and spread awareness of the work we do through those various platforms. We have also been recognized and we have won several awards, such as the American Apparel and Footwear Association Award for Excellence in Social Responsibility. And we were very proud that in 2013, our chairman was one of 5 global leaders to win the United Nations Award as the champion of women's empowerment principles. And that same year, we were honored with the Humanitarian Award at the FEMIS Awards. So all of this helps tell our story, to share our experiences and learnings with other businesses and other industries. And we believe through this, we are able to change mindset. We are able to help other organizations and industries also actively do work in this space. And what's important for us is we want to destigmatize the labels that are attached to a traditional garment worker in society and their families. And we want to make sure that we address these subtle biases that historically have prevented women from accessing opportunities, accessing education, accessing resources that sometimes have not helped them compete in this equal playing field. And that's really what we have been trying to do.
Okay. So, Dinali, I think it's great that you touched on the fact that the program does bring about an effort to like breaking stereotypes related to garment workers. So you might be quite aware that with the expansion of the apparel industry here in Sri Lanka, there have been some kind of cultural anxiety about the shifting gender roles in the Sri Lankan society relating to female garment workers. So you probably heard the term Juki girls for urban female factory workers. Could you please, in your own view, as to why do you think that this is the case?
Sure. So it's an interesting question, right? So if you look back, I think at the last 20 to 30 years ago, 30 years time frame and how we've kind of seen the industry evolve, I think there was a lot of shifts that happened in society and community with the apparel industry taking off. Young female adults leaving their homes and villages to go off to the zones for employment at a time when there was a culture that it was really almost unthought of, that you would have your female child or daughter or sister or wife kind of leave the home to take up that kind of employment, right? And just as any other name calling, I think most people were possibly ignorant. And that was really due to the lack of education, the lack of awareness, that they did not realize really how disrespectful or demeaning or hurtful words such as Juki Kella or Juki girls were. And, I don't want to say no fault of them, but I think ignorance was a big contributor to that. And through the programs, and I think the work that we do at MAS through WGB and our other programs, we have really tried to change that stigma and change the way our workers are looked not just from an industry, but also from the communities. And we do this by really championing their stories and sharing the stories of success and changing the mindset of those in their communities, which are the places that they come from. Today, when I look back, we have worked very hard to rebuild that dignity as well as give our team members and those at the shop floor the respect that they deserve. Um, we have immense support from the employee's family. We have a great deal of support that now comes from the communities, and they support us because they now know the kind of working environment that is there in the organization, how their family members are kind of treated, the workspace that they have, as well as they also know of the care and attention that we give to make sure that these ladies thrive, right? And when they thrive, who benefits? It's not just the organization, but it's also their family and their home and their communities. And I think through all of this work that we've done, we are trying to kind of break that stigma and the stereotype. And I think right now, I hope that majority of the country understands and appreciates the service done by the garment workers, majority of whom are women, because it's their massive contribution that has actually helped in terms of the countries and global economy. And the apparel and textile industry is one of the top contributors for Sri Lankan's merchandise exports in just last year itself. So it's important to recognize and understand that when such terms are being used um, to address women, it's, I think, reflective of some of the broader societal attitudes that are connected towards how we look at gender and these gender norms. And those are societal attitudes that we must break and that we must conquer. And it is really through programs such as this that we have really tried to do this. And I have to tell you, the apparel industry itself, it's not just about women being at work, but we really sometimes champion some very different dynamics. Many of our women who work at MAS are the breadwinner of their family. Now that's a, a different role that they're taking on, which traditionally you would think that it's the male resource in the family that needs to be the breadwinner. So we've been changing a lot of these kind of dynamics, but through education, through the stories, when we see that some of those stereotypes are breaking, that gives us immense pleasure. And for me, one of the things that really encourages me is when we see family members of our team members continuing to join the industry, and we see generations, and then that goes to show me that some of these stereotypes that existed, some of the way that the apparel workers are looked at is changing, and the value that these employees are bringing to the community, to the industry, and to the country is being recognized.
Thank you for that, Dinali. I'm happy to hear that what Women Go Beyond is just not doing like in the organization, but also you are impacting the community, which also impacts the country as well. So you've spoken about what led to this program being launched and how it helped MAS and the apparel industry change norms and challenge stereotypes, all while positively impacting your employees and their communities. So are you able to give us just a few insights as to how this program is structured?
Of course, of course. So I would say the Women Go Beyond program has two main pillars. We focus on women on the factory floor, and we also focus on women in management. If I look at the women on the factory floor, there are five, I would say, main areas that we touch on. So we touch on career advancement. So we really focus a lot on language development and communication, leadership skills, kind of career planning, and also training in non-traditional job roles are some of the work that we do in career advancement. We also work on giving our teams on the shop floor skills outside of their job role. So these could be entrepreneurship skills, financial management, business planning, and marketing, and holistic development and even areas such as sports and industrial training are some of the work that we do. We also focus on women's health and sexual reproductive health and rights. So this is really about reproductive health and family planning, breast cancer awareness, nutrition and hygiene, pre and postnatal care, medical camps and screening. So that's a bit of the work that goes in there. We also focus on preventing gender-based violence, and that is really about upskilling our counselors at every location. We have trained the trainer programs that we do on building awareness. We also engage with the families and communities a lot in this space. And the fifth pillar that supports his program is creating role models. So we recognize and we reward exceptional women on the shop floor. We share their inspiring stories with inside MAS and outside of MAS, and we also develop mentors for them. So that's a little bit of the structure of the program on the shop floor. The Women in Management also has five main focus areas, and if I was to just quickly talk about that, we focus for that segment a lot on unconscious bias training, because there are unconscious biases that all of us have. So how do we kind of break that? We focus on mentorship for women in management. We focus on childcare and making sure that we give childcare accessibility to our teams. We focus on what we call gender smart communication, that is really sensitizing teams on how you communicate and being more aware of change management and communication techniques in this space. And for the Women in Management program, we also look at sponsorship and how we make sure they're kind of being sponsored. So these are really how the programs are structured. We have learning materials that are in place. We have our internal trainers that we kind of work with on these areas. We also partner with external thought leaders and in external expertise in building up that kind of capability also. And that's a little bit of how the programs are structured.
All right, Dinali. Thank you for that. I do have a follow-up
Sure.
question in terms of the structure, especially in terms of empowering women, in terms of skills development, especially in light of digital literacy and entrepreneurial skills. Can you give us an overview what
Of
the
course.
organization
So
does?
actually, those are two, I would say, very important skills that we want to empower our teams with. So on the entrepreneurial skills, we do encourage our team members to be entrepreneurs, and it could be for many reasons, from supplementing their income. And we also have realized that one of the important things that we want to do is we want to give the ladies skills that even a time when they stop working at MAS and they leave, that they are able to have a stable income and they're able to continue to provide for their family. So entrepreneurial skills in terms of identifying an area of interest, building a business plan, linked to that, financial literacy, financial management are all kinds of skills that we would work with. In addition to that, I think digital literacy is a huge area of focus, and we look at this in two lenses. One is, I think, just to do our jobs and everyday jobs, and for them to also progress in the organization, understanding IT skills and being able to work on the digital platforms is super important. Over and above that, from an entrepreneurship perspective, it also becomes important because we do teach them in terms of how they could use the digital platforms to showcase their ventures, sell their products, brand themselves. Now, this digital world itself comes with a lot of risks, right? So part of that is also educating them in terms of how do you navigate this space and be careful and look after yourself, and how do you recognize things like cyberbullying, things like cyber violence, and how do you make sure you are able to navigate that? So recognize and respond. So that is also a big component of the programming that we do.
Thank you for that. So my next question is to do with unpaid care work and how exactly Women Go Beyond as a program addresses this. Globally and here in Sri Lanka, women disproportionately carry the burden of unpaid care work, which is rooted, as we all know, in social stereotypes. The female labor force participation in Sri Lanka is already low, stagnated at around 30%, and the gender gap in terms of unpaid care work definitely contributes to this. And according to the 2022 labor force survey, about 58.8% women remain economically inactive due to household activities. So, childcare, parental leave, which includes paid maternal and paternal leave, are key areas that we at the Women's Policy Action Network have identified in our research as being the most important to help increase women's labor force participation. So, Dinali, I know you touched on this as you were discussing with me. So, considering that MAS has an ambitious goal of achieving 30% women in management by 2025, with respect to these key areas, I would like to know over the years how exactly the organization has chosen with this program to address and actively intervene with regards to breaking social stereotypes in respect to these key areas.
Sure. So let me maybe pick and speak about some of the focused initiatives that we've done. And you kind of mentioned it in your question, in some of the areas that you all have researched that need to be kind of addressed. So one of the things that we did do is in 2020, we did introduce a paternity leave into the organization. As you're aware, legally, there's no law and there's no requirement to do that, but we believed it was important, where fathers are also encouraged and allowed to go through that whole experience of being with their newborns as a parent, which is also a great emotional physical support for the mother at that time. So that was a policy that we launched. We have also mandated to make at least one form of employer supported childcare to be accessible to all employees, so that they have the choice if they want to use that or not. And this includes internal and external pressures, as well as other forms such as giving them an allowance for them to have childcare outside. We recently rolled out a maternity support guideline, which sets out recommendations for the HR teams and the line managers to engage with the moms who are going on leave, and then how do we re-engage them back when they come back from leave, and how is that done in a smooth and effective manner. We have also mandated that each location has a lactation room where moms returning back from maternity leave have a comfortable environment where they can pump their milk, store it in a hygienic kind of manner. We also continue to work with external industry experts to improve. We already spoke about this: entrepreneurial skills, financial literacy, as well as exposing them to new avenues of market through digital literacy. And there are all kinds of other programs that are done in terms of IT knowledge and other skills to help them kind of go forward. So those are a few of the areas that we've kind of looked at to really propel this agenda.
Right. We are nearing the end of our discussion. I just have this one final question for you, Dinali. For audience, could you maybe share some pointers on how other organizations, industry can also learn and implement from what MAS has achieved with the launch of such a program as Women Go Beyond?
Sure. So I'll just kind of share it from my perspective, right? I think programs such as this can't just be done to kind of put a tick in the box, right? You have to have, firstly, a very strong belief of what you want to do, why you want to do this, and the cause that you're really trying to drive after. And that strong belief is super important. You've got to have a very strong conviction that this is the right thing to do. And I think it starts from there. You have to have leadership buy-in from your most senior member of the organization to all leaders in the organization need to be bought in to the agenda, because a lot of these things that we speak about is just, whilst we have policy and stuff, it's the leaders that have to actually implement and make sure that these things are in place, right? Ideally, you should build a holistic program take a comprehensive approach that just goes beyond addressing immediate needs. And so our program has also evolved over the years. And I think important to firstly understand what the needs are, and then how are you going to kind of address this, and then how do you build upon that as it evolves. Bring in allies and partners into the journey so that you have allies and partners that are supporting you and that could help kind of influence and bring that change. What's really important in a journey like this is there is no one formula. This is what has worked for MAS. The formula for other organizations could be different. To come up with this formula, we had various setbacks, times that we failed, times that it didn't go according to plan. And we had to learn from that, check, adjust our programs, and go forward. But the important thing is to go forward. It's very easy in a program like this to give up, to say it's kind of not working, or we are hitting roadblock after roadblock. Dinali, can't do this. And my thing to the team is like, no, as long as you're taking a baby step every day, that's a baby step forward. We may not be able to run at the pace that we want to, but just keep moving forward. And I think that's important. Involve employees in the design and the implementation of the program. Get their thoughts, get their views, understand what's working, what's not, so that they are also bought into the program. Understand the cultural context of your organization, of your country, where you're at, what will work, what will not. That is also very important. That has to be kind of considered. And I think, and share the stories, however small or big. Share the stories of success so that you create that change and momentum in the organization. And I think most of all, you just start. If this is something that you want to do, I would say just start and just go for it. So that would be my kind of advice.
Thank you very much for that, Dinali. I think it's amazing, just like I said, how women go beyond. This is something that was started in 2003, and now it's been 20 years since the launch of this program. And I assume you'll probably had many challenges along the road, but still you kept pushing back in terms of breaking gender stereotypes and empowering women in the workforce, and not just within the organization, but also in terms of community and also globally, as you all are spanned in 15 countries. So thank you for joining with us today, Dinali.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure to kind of share the MAS journey, and I must commend y'all's organization as well for having programs such as this, because it's through all of this that we can continue to push this agenda forward. So thank you very much.
And also thank you to those tuning into the discussion. You can watch the other discussions on our YouTube platform.